at the end of the day, the way I see it is my job is to help companies create a healthy company. And if you create a healthy company, you can create a scalable company, right? Because now I have the foundation to build on. You can choose to chase the growth and scale it or not. We at least have a healthy company to do that with, but you can make that decision. It might require some investment, it might require some risk. And then if you have a scalable company, you have a saleable company. But again, not everybody's interested in selling immediately. I mean, some of these people, it's generational wealth or whatever, they're going to transfer it down. What I've concluded is I want to be there for the person, and I just want to understand what we're trying to achieve. And I don't want anybody to BS each other. The toughest ones are the ones who say they want growth, but they actually aren't pursuing it.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the CEO Podcast. I'm your host, Mario, together with my partner, co-host, Robert Hargrove from Masterful Coaching, where we talk with today's CEOs about what are the burning issues today, 2025. Now, this episode is a little bit different because we have Dale Robinette. Dale is a Vistage Chair and a scale-up coach, also author of the book Rich Layers. And unlike our previous guests who were CEOs, Dale joins us as a coach. Dale, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. I am really excited about this episode because we will get a perspective. Usually it's Robert and me who give the perspective from the coach's position. But this time we do have a coach as a guest where we can get your perspective on what is happening in today's organizations, specifically on the C-level CEOs and his or her executive team. So, Dale, maybe introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your early beginnings, early influences, background, and how did you end up at Vistage and scaling up?
Yeah, fair enough. So I grew up in a rural area in Upper Michigan and came out of that wanting to get into electronic sales. And so I joined the Navy actually, and that's what brought me to San Diego, California. I was in electronics warfare. And so when I got out of the Navy, I went to San Diego State University into business. And so that kind of framed me for getting into electronic sales. So my first job, I was really fortunate. I ended up with a company. We were the leader in the industry in passive electronics. The company was called AMP. Today it's called TE Connectivity. And so eventually it was acquired, even while I was there, it was acquired by Tyco. And we became known as Tyco Electronics while I was there. And so that company, it took our top 10 competitors to equal our annual revenue selling passive electronics. And from there, I went to Peregrine Semiconductor here in San Diego, where I was a general manager. But the reason I bring all this up was I was paid my entire career on year over year growth. And it was one of those things that if you achieve, of course, you accelerate. And if not, you have the threat of losing your job. That would get your attention.
That's something you said. You were paid on
He was
year-to-year growth.
Yeah.
Year over year growth. And I guess so because of that, why do I do scaling up and why did I write my book? It really all stems back to that time and really throughout my entire career. I mean, that's what we're paid on is year over year growth, or at least judged on it. And if you perform, you move up. And if not, you may lose your job. And so it gets your attention. And that's where I started everything. At AMP/Tyco, it was a large organization. When I joined them, they were 5 billion. When I left them, they were 13 billion, largely through acquisition. And I became the number one sales guy out of 500 in the company. And then I became the youngest sales manager in the history of the company. And then I became the number one sales manager in the company. From there, they put me into an executive rotation. And so the rest of my career, I was in executive management. That was how I found myself to do even the book, is that people then would ask me, how do you achieve growth in all these different positions? There's a fallacy that good salespeople can't be good sales managers. Good sales managers can't be good executive leaders, managers. What people would say to me is, how did you question a lot? I always felt like they were looking for an aw shucks answer. Aw shucks, you just do that. And the truth is, it's hard. There's a lot of variables associated
Yep.
with it. And so when I was with Peregrine Semiconductor, I started there as a GM. I spent 3 years building out a division at Peregrine. When I joined them, they were 40 million. So I went from being responsible for $1 billion at Tyco Electronics to $1 million at Peregrine Semiconductor. And at the moment when I got there, I thought I'd made the biggest mistake in my career. But it ended up being really important for me in really everything that I do today, because the truth is, when you wear those different hats, you look at things differently. When you understand what an entrepreneur is being handed to them, meaning you have $1 million company, you can't do the things you can do in $1 billion company. There's a resource limitation. So these are the things that I had to deal with. And what helped me with my coaching today, when I'm dealing with big companies or small companies, I can understand the different levers and the different things that they're being dealt. The book was actually something that came out of Vistage. So what happened was we got the company public at Peregrine Semiconductor. We took the business. I started out as 3 years building out a division. And then from there, I was part of the executive team. You guys know how it goes. And I was beating them up to put in a global sales org. And I got one of those, why don't you do it? And so for 3 years, I put in a global sales org. We took the business from 40 million up to 340 million. We got it public, and that gave me an exit. And so from there, I ended up with Vistage. So that's how I ended up joining Vistage.
Nice.
And the attraction for Vistage for me was I've always just been enamored with business. And I am a lifelong learner around the idea of business and specifically growth. And so when I started coaching CEOs, it was really fascinating to me that the idea of growth, and not everybody was actually interested in growth. And in my career, if you're not growing, you're dying type of thing. And I would meet with these entrepreneurs who were just not as interested as I was. And so one day we had a Vistage speaker. We have these amazing speakers. And I go around the room and say, what'd you get out of it? And what are you going to do with it? And we get done and I move on. And they said, hold on a second. And I said, yeah. And they said, what are you going to do with it? And I'm like, I mean, I don't play, right? I'm the facilitator. And I said, what do you want me to do? And they said, we want you to write a book. And I said, on what? And they said, on growth. So that's where my book came from. So my
Well,
book was the idea of how do you actually help companies grow. So anyway, that's my background. That's how I ended up doing what I did.
love it. One thing kind of stuck, and I want to just poke this a little bit because,
Sure.
when you talk to entrepreneurs and they say, no, I am not interested in growth, what gives? Did you really get that answer? Or oh,
Many times.
oh, so what's behind that? Right? Is it lack of ambition? Is it I'm afraid? Right? Is it the imposter syndrome?
It depends on the person. But I had one guy that I was working with, and it was December. I said, listen, what are your goals for next year? And he said, Dale, I know you're this growth guy. He goes, growth isn't really just that interesting to me. And he had his own company and they did HVAC, but in reality, they were at the point where they had evolved over 50 years and they were building out schools, like buildings within schools. He said, in any given year, there's only so many projects in these schools. He said, of those projects, there's only a certain number that we're actually interested in. Of those, he said, there's only a few school districts that we actually want to work with. Those are the things I bid on. But more importantly, what I discovered in that meeting was his net worth was about $150 million. One of us sitting at the table had 150 million and the other one didn't. Somebody figured something out that the other one didn't. And the truth is, he was in a different place, right? He didn't need more money. And so there's that. I had another guy who was actually running a $750 million company. He said, Dale, I'm just not that interested in growth. He said, I think you're missing a question. I said, what's the question? He said, why? And I said, explain that. He says, in my business, he says, he was owned by a larger organization. And he said, they give me a nut to hit each year. He said, that's what I hit. If I overachieve, there's actually no benefit for me. All I do is hit that number. Sad news, but it's true. And then there's others who just they're already making a good enough living doing what they're doing. They don't want the added stress.
You
They'll
mean they are
they'll
content?
yeah, they'll say to me, "I'm already making enough money. I've invested my life's earnings into this business. I don't wanna invest any more money into it. I don't wanna work any harder. And so why would I do it?" So there's just different people who are and what I'll tell you is, I think the percentage of people who are actually chasing growth, they'll talk about growth. They want it, but they want like the magic wand. They don't actually want to do the work to get there. They just hope one day it shows up.
Mm.
And I think that that percentage is actually bigger than the other. I think there's more people that are like that, especially on the entrepreneurial side, that are groomed that way than actually are chasing the growth.
I'd like to jump in here because I found something you said particularly interesting. That you were paid based on year to year growth. And that kind of really rang a bell in my head that if you're coaching CEOs, which is we're in the same industry as you, we're coaching CEOs and teams. Especially in public companies, that's what CEOs get paid to do. They get paid for year to year growth. And I remember a story. I went with a CEO friend to a meeting on Wall Street with institutional investors. And a CEO came up to give his growth story, and the institutional investors didn't buy it. And you could see the big stock exchange board, and you could watch the stock of his company. The market cap decreased by 30% as he was speaking. And I came out of the meeting, I said, "You really have to have a growth story to tell when you talk to investors." He said, "Yes," the CEO said, "and you have to have a growth story to tell every year." It seems to me that might be the crux of the matter in coaching CEOs. I mean, we all talk about leadership and culture and strategy and whatnot. But at the end of the day, I think Peter Drucker said that the CEO is the only person that the outside world holds accountable for the company's economic performance. So I think you really touched on something there that's important for both coaches and for CEOs. That's where you need to be focusing. If you don't,
Yeah.
you're out of there. And if you're not focusing on that, or you don't need to, you're probably not someone, if you don't mind my saying, Dale, that any of us should be bothering to coaching. You don't have enough at stake to have a coach if you're content with making enough money for this year, having a beautiful house, and taking vacations and plays in Florida play golf. So that
You know, I'm full circle on that. What you just described was me 12 years ago. It was really the moment with the guy who has the $150 million net worth that was the epiphany for me. And it's interesting with scaling up, our pillars are people, strategy, execution, and cash. And if you think about it, every company, yeah, if you get those right, you're probably running a healthy company. What I've realized is that even in that company that where the guy was making a good living, he still wanted to run a healthy company. In other words, at the end of the day, the way I see it is my job is to help companies create a healthy company. And if they create a healthy company and they can stop there, I mean, if that's all they want, great. Let's put these tools in place and you'll be running a much healthier company than you were previously. If you create a healthy company, you can create a scalable company, right? Because now I have the foundation to build on, and you can choose to pursue it or not, right? You can choose to chase the growth and scale it or not. We at least have a healthy company to do that with, but you can make that decision. It might require some investment, it might require some risk. There's the different things, that different levers that we have. We have 6 levers to help do that. And then if you have a scalable company, you have a saleable company. But again, not everybody's interested in selling immediately. I mean, some of these people, it's generational wealth or whatever, they're going to transfer it down. So, just what I've concluded is I want to be there for the person and I just want to understand what we're trying to achieve. And I don't
Yeah.
want anybody to BS each other. In other words, the toughest ones are the ones who say they want growth, but they actually aren't pursuing it. That's where I think the issue
So,
is.
Dale, my question here is what is the difference between CEOs who are, we call them exponential CEOs versus the linear ones, right? And we touched on it, right? One of the things, obviously, either being content or being ambitious, right? But what would be if we take that out of the equation? Like I am content with the 150 million that I have. So what separates these two?
I see it as a couple things. One is risk tolerance and big thinking. So if they have the risk tolerance to pursue it, that's one piece of it. The other piece is I work a lot on mindset and with the CEO and the executive team and shift their thinking from incremental thinking to exponential thinking. And what I'll tell you is that I've done this literally my entire career. This 10x thing is an interesting thing. It's something that's become, I don't know, current. Everybody seems to be using this 10x number. I was a young sales guy and I pulled the 10x number out of the air. And it was because they gave me a commission plan. And when I calculated out what my commission would be on, I don't know, 6, 7, 8%, whatever it was that year, it just wasn't that interesting. And I also was in such a big organization that I wasn't getting the attention that I needed to develop what I wanted to develop from the company. My division leader he ran a $2 billion organization. To get his attention, I had to come in with something bigger than $1 million. So I took my territory, which was 5 million, and said, what would happen if I 10x that? What would I have to do? That's where that came from for me. And so I was out looking for 50 million. And as it turns out, I found 100 million. And
Wow.
that's when I became the number one sales guy in the country. What I'm saying is that when I work with teams and I ask them, look, and just to be clear, I want to do this in 5 years. I'm not talking about like a 50-year BHAG. I want to 10x their business within 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
And what I'm asking them is whatever their top line revenue is, I literally multiply it by 10. Everybody can do that, right? How do we get that? A
Ah,
perfect a perfect answer for me is they'll say, if you want a 10x it, and then I say, yes. And they tell me, and it happens all my career. It's happened. I mean, it's unbelievable. Matter of fact, it's rare. It doesn't happen. So I think that it's a
when
mindset.
you say if you want to 10x their current revenue, they say, hey, if you really want to do that, and then they tell you they know how to do it.
They just never been asked. They've
Wow.
just never
That's
been
interesting.
asked. As a matter of fact, I'll go a little bit stronger. So if you think about it, every year it looks like this. Every year we know the dance. The executive management comes down and says, we're going to grow by 8%. And the team says, we could never. We can only grow, we'll give you 6. And the dance goes back and forth. And what do? They settle on 7, right?
Well,
CEO's
I
not
think the word is subtle.
Yeah, CEO's not happy, the executive team's not happy, the whole management, everybody's not happy. Why? Because they're not given anything to help them achieve that. They're just told they're going to somehow magically grow an extra 6, 7, 8%. And what they think that you're telling them is, we're going to squeeze a little bit more juice out of you, and you're going to work a little bit harder. And they're like, we're already working flat out. What do you want from us? Right?
Yeah, it's one of those. Whenever I work with the executive team and mostly CROs, so chief revenue officers, and we say, okay, so it's end of the year, we set goals, and then, okay, what are the quotas for your closers? Said last year it was 1 million. This year we want them to close 1.2. Okay. What are you going to do to help them close that extra 20%? Like, how are you going to be, if you're not going to change anything, nothing is going to change. Like, they will still make roughly the same amount of quota they did this year. So if they did 850, they're going to do between 8 and 900 plus minus to make that happen. Like, how are you going to help them? And
Well,
that
so
kind of begins
that's
the
exactly
thought
right. So
process.
what I'll tell you is, and it's so counterintuitive, but when you bring out to the team that you're going to grow 6, 7, 8%, they're all frustrated. When you bring out to the team that you're going to do 10x, they're actually elated. The entire organization's everybody's excited. Why? Because they know it's no longer on their shoulders. They know that you're going to do something different. They know that you're going to invest. More
Hmm.
importantly, they know there's going to be opportunity for them. If you're growing like that, chances are there's opportunities for promotions. There's probably going to be more pay. We're going to be growing like crazy. We might even be a leader in something, and that's always exciting, right? So there's a nuance there that when you grow 10x, when you put up a 10x number, the team actually gets behind it. When you put up the 6, 7, 8% number, they fight you the whole way.
Let me ask you a question or two, and that everything you're saying has been fascinating and intriguing. I actually have a value judgment on it. I don't see Vistage as pushing people toward 10x or what I call impossible futures or driving transformation. I've interacted with some of the people there, and I found them to be, as you described, not really going for it. I don't know that much about scaling up, but I suspect it's the same way. Why don't you do your own thing and based on your book, 6 strategies for 10xing your business in however many years?
No, it's all good. I will.
I think you may have something better to offer than either one of those organizations. Why do you feel you need to work with these other groups? Or maybe you have a good reason.
Yeah, I think in the case of Vistage, let me just say, when I started with Vistage, I had never been a coach before. I'd never done consulting before. And they gave me tools and we do a lot of training. And so I enjoyed it. And let me just say that statistically, when I joined Vistage, actually, because I am a growth guy, one of the main reasons I joined Vistage was because of one number. At the time, there were 15,000 members in Vistage. Today, there's 45,000. When I joined them, the average Vistage member company was outgrowing their peers by 3x,
Hmm.
3 times. That was a staggering statistic. And let me just say, I called BS on it. I said, I got to see this. You're doing that in a meeting. Let me see what you're doing.
Oh,
And
great.
when I sat in the first meeting, I saw it going down. And what I'll tell you is the way it works, it's not about the chair. It's about the people you put in a room. It's about the cross pollination of ideas. It's about changing the way people look at their business. And let me just say this. So, what I saw was there was a guy that processed an issue, which we have, if there's any IP around Vistage, it's the way we process issues and opportunities. And he actually brought in an opportunity. And there was a point, and I'm sitting in the back room. It's literally my first meeting. I'm just a fly on the wall. I want to see how they do this. There was a point where he goes back in his chair like this. He looked like he had been shot. And I thought, it startled me. I'm like, what? What just happened? And I went up to him afterwards and I said, you got a lot out of that. And he goes, I did. He said, I said, so and so really helped you. He goes, he did, but so did so and so. And what I walked away with was these were totally different industries. And if
Hmm.
you picture it this way, every industry goes to market one way, right? They go to market their way, and it's suddenly somebody branches off and does something different, and they start to win. And over time, people will correct and start doing what they're doing. And this happens 100 times over 100 years in the industry that's 100 years old. And you have this industry that's going off this way, going to market one way. You have another industry that does the same thing, but they're maybe going this way. In that meeting, someone from this industry says, in our industry, this is what we do. And all of a
Hmm.
sudden, you're transferring this knowledge, this vetted idea. I don't know. This is just the way we do our industry. And this is what happened in that meeting. And I just saw it and went, oh my God, that is really mind blowing. Most people, when I interview people to join Vistage, and I'm screening them, I want to make sure I have the right team. We have a cute little term. It's the board you can't afford. And the
Oh,
truth is, when you think about it, for the amount of money that people join to pay to play to be in Vistage, it's really nothing. I mean, think about what you'd pay to get that kind of get those people around the table. If you could get these people around the table, right? And they're sharing this knowledge across industries. And it's all about diversification in every sense of the word. And so that's where the strength of it comes from. So I love that. I love the concept of it. It has a good brand. So I love all that. Scaling up, Vern's a researcher. Vern researched, he's an MIT researcher. He researched what do the best companies do different than others? And he compiled all this nicely for us, right? And it gives you the structure. We have tools. Here's all of our tools that we can use to help them tease out how do we apply this inside your organization. I love that. And then I think that with my book, it was really just filling in some of the gaps. So what I look at is It's really about changing the way people view their business. It's about a mind shift change. And then I'm giving them specific levers. And I believe that as an executive, our job is to simplify business. And my book really works on this idea of here's just 6 strategies. These are it. This is the only way you can grow your business, period. These are the 6 levers you get. Choose them. Which ones do you want to use, or do you want to use them all?
Can you in your book without giving the store away?
Yeah, sure. The idea behind the book was when people kept asking me, hey, how do you do this? I actually went in to fill in for another Vistage Chair. It just so happened we didn't have a speaker. And when we don't have a speaker, we'll usually do an exercise. So I said to the chair who I was filling in for, I said, hey, what do you want me to do? And he says, I know you're this growth guy. Will you do something on growth? So I created this exercise and I did this exercise with the team. And as it turns out, I was way off script this day. There was a point where I said, look, guys, I'm the chair of the local chairs. I teach people how to facilitate the meeting. And I'm telling you right now, if the chair comes back and knows that we spent a day doing a workshop on how to grow your business, he's going to be frustrated. They said, this is what we want. So for an entire day, all we did is unpack businesses and have them come out with a 10x strategy on how they could 10x their business. And so with that, that was kind of the foundation of where my book came from was this. It's just simplified an approach for people to think about their business differently.
Can you say one or two of the levers that, for an example?
Yeah, sure. When you think about it, what are the ways that you can grow your business? You can sell more of what you have. So product penetration, right? The number one lever. Why? Everybody says, how does you guys know how this sounds, right? Oh, my sales suck. My sales team is awful.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Yeah, yeah, yeah. If I just had a better sales team, I could make this stuff all day long. I just need a better sales team. It's rarely the issue. What I'll tell you is about 3% of the time, that's actually the issue. If you want to 10x your business, it's not a sales issue typically. Occasionally, one I'm working with right now, it actually is a sales issue. It's actually rare. I have one. It's actually a sales issue. And so easy enough. I know that background. Great. Market expansion. There's so many times. I mean, really, what I'm trying to do, one of the first questions I ask is what's your total available market? What's your and total available market? It sounds something like this. We only have 1% of the market, right? If I get, I mean, I don't I have 0.1%. If I just get 1%, I'll be wealthy. And I say, how long have you been in business? They'll say 20 years. And I say, what percentage do you have? Why don't you have more? So it's because they're looking at the wrong thing. There's TAM, then there's serviceable available market.
Yep.
We're
And
still not.
serviceable, attainable market.
And then we get into obtainable. Usually it's an order of magnitude different at each one. And the point
Yeah.
is, what I
Yeah.
find is that in most companies, this was actually quite astounding to me, was that most companies actually can't 10x their business doing what they're doing today, just based on the SOM, the serviceable obtainable market.
Yeah.
They already have such a large percentage of their market. It's surprising, even local companies. I worked with a local windows and door company. He had 30% market share, he estimated, in the San Diego market in what he did. You can't 10x 30%. It's not possible.
Yeah.
So what do?
Well,
We move up the street.
yeah.
It forced him to make different decisions.
People get stuck. I would say people get stuck in the stories they tell to themselves. I think the greatest example is the Tam Sam Sam. The scale, they will say, oh, our total addressable market is 7.5 billion. All right. How many of those are in the buying window? How many of those your value proposition fits perfect or near perfect? How many phone numbers do you have of those people? How many can you call? How many can you get to? And so on and so on, right? So I think the stories that CEOs tell to themselves, as you said it in the beginning, it's the mindset issue, right?
You made two that you don't think are that good. What are the good ones?
Do you want me to send you the link?
Well, yeah. Well, these are something else. Yeah, most people would say, yeah, I've got to, my sales team has to be better, or we want to sell in Europe or China. Okay, those are two. I like the idea of what are the 6 strategies that you could use to 10x your business. We always already know the two most boring ones, but and the two most likely or obvious ones. But maybe, yeah, we don't want to give it the store away, but give us something that maybe people wouldn't have thought of.
No, that's the thing. The fact that you can't list them, I guess, tells you part of it, but there's product extensions. Look at Apple every year, right? They have to come up
Hmm.
with a new line or eventually not, right?
Yeah.
I don't even know that they're selling phones anymore. I think they're selling cameras, right? I mean, what's the latest
Yeah,
technology?
that's a good point. Yeah.
But every year they come up with a product extension, and it's still, if you look at Apple as an example, Apple, if they had stayed in the PC business, we wouldn't even really be talking about them. It
No.
really wasn't until they got to the iPhone that they really exploded. So there's product extension, there's new products, there's diversification. Diversification, whenever I even say the word, the hair on the back of my neck stands up. It's getting into something you know nothing about. And at that point, you're doing a make versus buy decision, which leads you to acquisitions.
Yeah. Two ways you can grow any company. One is organic and one is M&A.
That's right.
It's like that. And then whatever organic means, as you said, is it different verticals? Is it different products? Is it this? Is it this? Is it more cheaper to buy a company already building it, incorporated? It is a fun topic.
I've got to buy that book. I've got to find out the secrets in that book. I hope everybody else the same
Everyone
way.
just go
There's
go
something
go
there
out
he's
and
not
buy
telling
Dale's
us.
book.
There's something there he's not telling us. A couple.
He's the master. He needs to keep
He
his
said he was a
secrets.
great salesman. Now I believe it.
Dale, before we close it out, your work with CEOs, also with medium-sized companies, large enterprises. This is something that I always ask on every guest. It's difficult to say just one or two, but you can try. What is one piece of advice you'll give to the newly appointed CEO? So, CEO comes in, sees the company. What's your like one or two pieces of advice for the newly minted CEO?
That's
Yeah,
a good
it's
one.
interesting. I actually have a couple of those, and they're running different size companies. One's running 5 billion, one of them is running 60 million. And I mean, within the last quarter, this happened. And the one thing that I'll say is that I find that as a coach, most of the time I'm pulling them out of their business. So they're involved in the minutia. And the way I
Uh,
see it is you have two different types of CEOs. You have the founder CEO. And the challenge with the founder is that there was a day when they did all of the functions and they can do all of the functions. And that's the bad news. So they can go down and pack into the organization and get involved in stuff in different parts of the organization. And matter of fact, they get frustrated when people change something because then all of a sudden they don't know how to do it anymore. Then you have the hired gun, and the hired gun came up one leg of the stool. And guess where they like spending all their time? Right? They like going down that leg and spending all their time in the area that they know best. I would hate to follow that person because they're constantly going to be mucking around, coming back down. So that's what I'm usually telling them is that you no longer are responsible for the same things you were responsible the day before. And so we've got to get you out of the organization. We've got to get you thinking outward, looking at customers, looking at markets, understanding what the vision is, and trying to figure out how to spend more time understanding that. And then, of course, the internal culture and building the culture around the way you want it to be.
Yep.
There's so much change going on inside of organizations culturally. And so that alone, you're the figurehead for. But to me, that's the biggest thing is just making sure they don't kill themselves by being a doer any longer.
Awesome. Dale, thank you so much for being our guest.
I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Awesome conversation, by the way. Both me and Robert are very passionate about growth, 10xing. Robert worked with Fortune 10 CEOs. I ran several companies as a VP sales / CRO. So this is really a topic very close to our hearts. To everyone out there listening, thank you so much for joining us. This was the CEO podcast with Coach Dale Robinette. And until next time, take care.